with us on Retire Smart Austin. Brad Johansson with Phil Capriotti Sr. Empower Wealth and Tax. How are you, my friend?
It's a beautiful thing, and I got to tell you, life is beautiful. You know, I don't know.
Life is beautiful.
It really is. Yeah, I got to tell you a quick story before we get into this.
Oh, I want a story.
Man, I got to tell you, folks, you know, my wife, beautiful woman, I've been with her for decades, and of course she made me chase her for quite a few years before she conceded to say I do. Anyway, to make a long story short, she said to me, honey, I love you very much, but I will never buy a house on the golf course.
Okay, you remember what year in the relationship this was that she said this?
This was after 20 years.
Oh, this is after 20 years?
Yeah.
Because you'd always said you wanted
buying
to, right?
additional, we're buying additional house. Yeah, I want a house in Lake. I said, honey, but we have a house. Yeah, but I want it on the big part. But so at any rate, folks, unbelievable. So what happens? So, you know, we're a member of the Horseshoe Bay Country Club. Great place. There's 4 different golf courses we can play at, right? So, you know, they have Apple Rock, Ram Rock, they have Slick Rock, and then the premier is Summit Rock. Oh, yeah. So I happen to find this beautiful home.
Hold it. You found it?
Well, I found it online, right?
Okay, you found it.
And so it's sitting there on hole number 14. But it's the exact type of house my wife is looking for. Santa Fe style, sautee tiles, you know, right out of, like it came out of Santa Fe, okay? So I'm like...
So when you found, I see the face. When you found it, you said, okay, let's test
the theory. So I said, honey, I have a house that I want you to look at. I think you're going to like it. There's only one problem. It's on the golf course. So reluctantly, she hesitated and said, okay, I'll come look at it. So at any rate, we got to the house, we drove up, and she's like starstruck. She likes the entrance. We walk into the front door. She says to me, grabs me by the arm, she goes, no matter how excited you get, don't let the realtor know that you really want to buy it. We want to get our best price. So I'm like, oh, God. We go into the house. We go into the foyer. She's looking up, again, all starstruck. We go into the living room. The kitchen's huge, fireplace, a big outdoor wraparound patio with a kiva. So I turn around, the realtor's in back of me, and my wife is in back of the realtor, and she goes... So anyway, to make a long story short, what did we do? We bought the house on Summit, and we're very, very happy with it. She's thrilled.
Has she thrown that out the window? Has she admitted that 20 years ago she said, I'm never going to live on a golf course?
No, let's just say I let that go, and I let her let that go. You know, some battles aren't worth fighting, and for me, I looked at it as a win-win. There was no battle here. She's happy, I'm happy, and I'll tell you what, even further yet, she says to me, oh, and hun, by the way, your Horseshoe Bay office is only 4/10 of a mile from the house. You can just drive the golf cart right into the office, see your clients, you know, and then from there, it's only 3/10 of a mile to go to the golf course and go tee off. She had it all planned out for me.
So much, what a great situation for you, which leads me, it's a story that leads me into you approaching this, broaching the topic of something she said she would never do. Might be a little risky. Question is, how risk tolerant are you? So I'm going to take you into risk tolerance because there's a difference now, folks, as you're getting ready to retire as to risk tolerance and risk capacity. And how do we manage our risk tolerance going into that? We've talked about it when we've done programs together, and that's a lot of these guys who are advising are in the accumulation phase. Now, risk tolerance changed when we're going into distribution phase. So take me into what we should be at least starting out to think about as our risk tolerance going into retirement.
Well, the very first thing that we really need to do is take a look or a snapshot, especially of the portfolio, of all of their assets, especially the investments inside of the portfolio. This is why we run a Morningstar report, complimentary for everyone that comes into our office. That helps them understand what their true risk tolerance is. It's not always just asking a series of questions, although we do that as well. We want to determine what their risk score is. So, for instance, folks, if I'm speaking Greek to you right now, your risk score, if you had all of your money in the S&P 500 index, your risk score would be a 1.00.
Okay.
A 1. So most folks in retirement, and your average return would be, over the last 10 years, would average about 15% per year. Okay, some folks don't need 15% per year, and they don't need that type of risk. So, for instance, during the subprime mortgage collapse, folks that had a 1 or a 0.9, they saw their portfolios drop 52%. The S&P 500 dropped 52% in 2008. There was a 6-month period. Well, let's face it, if you have $1 million and you lose 50%, you have $500,000, plus you're taking distributions, you're in distribution, you need to make 100% just to get back to even.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is we want to measure what is your actual risk number, or what is your risk tolerance. We do that by first looking at where you are. It's like going to a doctor's office and having your blood test done. If you have certain symptoms, we really can't diagnose what the potential condition is until we do the blood test.
Yeah.
That's your Morningstar report, folks. So we want to do the Morningstar report. That helps us determine what your true risk is in your portfolio. Then we'll determine what your risk tolerance is. I want to make sure that that portfolio's risk tolerance matches up with your actual, let's say, appetite for risk.
Yeah.
So for most folks, they're happy with 8, 9, 10% with no more than, say, a risk score of somewhere between 0.45 and 0.50, not 1.0. So many times we'll have to dial down that risk, and by tactically managing the portfolio, meaning using investments that have a high potential for growth now with very low risk, like, for instance, investing in like AI and things of that nature, we're seeing a very high return with little risk. Why? Because it's the future. So we want to make sure that we look inside of these portfolios and then structure, certain types of sectors. I don't want to be in very risky sectors. I maybe want a large cap dividend, a portfolio with about 40, 50 different stock companies that are large companies that average dividend 3.5%, 4% a year. So we see capital appreciation of maybe 8, 9, 10% plus the dividend. So we want to make sure that your portfolio matches your actual risk tolerance. The last thing that you want to do is have too much stress in retirement because you have too much risk in your portfolio.
Amen. I mean, a lot of people are walking into your office and people are saying, okay, well, you say I've got to have a plan. Here's my plan. And what they're dropping is a portfolio. When you said at the beginning, folks, if I'm speaking Greek to you, for a lot of people, they don't understand what the risk is within their portfolio, because that really isn't a plan. It's something that somebody's put together and said, here's where you need to be. How am I doing?
Yeah, and many times it's just an investment portfolio. I'm doing good. I'm doing extremely well. I made X amount last month or X amount last quarter. I like to look at both sides of the coin. I want to look at, yes, this is what you're making, but what are your fees? What are your internal fees? How diversified is your portfolio? It's amazing, Brad. We'll have folks come in and they'll have a list as long as my arm of mutual funds with all different names from A to V, straight on down, all different internal fees. Some of these internal fees range from 1.25% or higher per year. Some only maybe 2, 4, 6 basis points. But what happens is they have all different names, but they have all the same investments inside of the doggone mutual funds.
And didn't realize it.
No. So they're not diversified, but they think they are. And then when we actually take a look, when we have our group of certified financial planners actually run the risk evaluation, we come to find out, oh my gosh, you have a risk tolerance of, say, 70. And so what does that mean, Phil? Well, that means when we see the next repeat of the 2008, this portfolio can lose 35%. So I want to quantify that. Let's say I have 1.5 or 2 million in the portfolio. I'll say, well, I want to determine what's the risk tolerance. Well, if I lose 10%, I'm okay. 15%, I'm kind of going over. But if I lose 30%, That's unacceptable. So what we want to do is adjust the client's portfolio and their returns, make sure that it's diversified, but stay within their risk tolerance.
The question is, what's your risk tolerance? Have you even studied it? Do you know where you are? Do you know how your portfolio stacks up with the tolerance that you actually have? 888-818-6557. Come in for a complimentary portfolio retirement review that will also take you into a tax analysis as well. This is why I want to put this up as well, because Phil has developed this, and I want to make sure that you have access to it. This is empowertaxbill.com. This is a tax calculator to get you an idea of what your burden may be. You've got a partner, whether you like it or not, in your portfolio. That's the government. They want their share. We want to take you to have your money your way without having to pay it to somebody else. So make the phone call, 888-818-6557. We're talking about risk tolerance. What do we need to do if it's out of line? We'll talk about that when we come back.
One of the secondary reasons I got into the tax business is my very first job. It was an usher at a movie theater. So back in my day, since I'm a baby boomer, people would come, we would tear their ticket, and we would walk them down, seat them, and then come back. So up until that point, I was getting $5 a week for allowance, and I'm telling you, I was like an indentured servant. My brother was allergic to grass and pollen, so I had to do all the lawn work. I had to do all of the work, as a matter of fact. So I get my first check. I get 37 and a half hours. I'm making $2.10 an hour. This check's going to be close to $80. I look at the check and I get sticker shock. $41.78. I'm good at math. That's not adding up. So I go over to the manager. He says, "Oh, Phil," he says, "flip the check around. Federal income tax, state income tax, FICA tax, all of these different taxes." So that was my first lesson at 15 about how important paying taxes are. And by the way, I think that anyone that has paid taxes every year for 50 years, by the time they're 75, they should be tax-free. I don't care where they put their money. That's my belief. I believe we've done our fair share.
Yeah, Phil learned his lesson at 15. When did you learn your lesson? Have you learned your lesson yet? Brad Johansson along with Phil Capriotti, Empower Wealth and Tax, and we're talking about risk tolerance. Because at 15, you got a lot more risk tolerance than you do at 75, even at 65, maybe even at 55 when we're talking about this. You love to talk about behavioral finance as well, because there's an emotion that goes along with our risk tolerance as to, here's how I feel about it. But there's an actuality as to what your capacity is. You may feel that. Tell me about your behavioral finance and what you try and focus on with that.
Well, people have impulse buying, so we can apply this towards buying a car, buying a piece of jewelry, buying just about anything. But with reference to your investments, you know, the latest AI craze, okay, I'll have folks, friends will approach me on and off the golf course and say, "Hey, Phil, you know, what do you got your money in?" And I tell them straight on out. I mean, fact of the matter is, when my son Parker was 9 years old, he came to me to watch. We're watching. I think it was Bloomberg or maybe it was Fox Business, and he says, "Dad," he said, "you need to put $10,000 in Bitcoin, Dad." And he's
your 9-year-old?
9-year-old.
Okay.
So I said, "Parker, what the heck is Bitcoin?" He said, "Oh, Daddy, the latest and greatest. No, this is the future." This is my 9-year-old. He's getting ready to graduate from his internship out in Phoenix. He's going to come to work with the office.
That's beautiful.
He said, "Dad, they're only $400 a coin. You need to buy $10,000 worth of them." And so to me, that was an impulse buy. Now, sometimes impulse buys can be good or bad.
Sure they can.
So I told him, "Well, Parker, that's not going to happen. I'm a financial advisor, and we don't speculate like that. We don't speculate on things like that. However, I will buy $5,000 worth just to satisfy you."
How about that?
Okay. So fact of the matter is, everyone's looking for the latest and the greatest.
You bet.
But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't always pan out. It's not always a Bitcoin. So, for instance, there are a lot of AI companies entering into the market nowadays. So many folks believe that anything they purchase that's AI is kind of like Bitcoin. It's going to go to 100,000 plus. Yeah, not always true. Not always true. So impulse buying, especially if you're managing your own portfolio, I would recommend do the research. We have literally teams of analysts that analyze the data before we make any purchase. So when we look at our portfolio managers, and this is another thing, work with many different financial analysts and advisors. I have folks come into my office, Brad, they'll have 8, 10, 12, $15 million worth of liquid net worth with one advisor working with it. And I'll ask them, I'd like to get an idea of what they're doing. Are they tax accountant? Are they tax advisors? And most of the time, they've just been working with this advisor or this particular firm for 15, 20, 25 years. That's not really a very smart move, and nothing against the advisor, but you want to have multiple opinions. And you want to have multiple opinions because you want to weigh one against the other. So in our portfolios, we have multiple money managers. So we may have BR managing some of our portfolios. Everybody knows who BR is. I can't mention the name. We may have a certain bond company also managing some of our bonds, actively managing. We may have our home office managing our stock portfolios. What I would say is if you are working with just one advisor and you have significant assets in your portfolio, it's always good to get a second opinion, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with working with 2, and depending on the size of the portfolio, even 3 different advisors. You should have a tax advisor, you should have a tactical, as far as I'm concerned, portfolio manager, and then you want somebody to check it all, because it's good to get varying opinions because it gives you different points of view instead of having the regular chocolate vanilla. Yeah, I want all 33 flavors.
See, when you talk about the psychology of this for a lot of people, and I know this is true for a lot of people who come into your office, they say, well, I'm checking, but I really like my person. I like my guy, or I like my gal. And to move anything over, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Yeah.
How does that play into this when it's your money and you're trying to come up with the best strategy?
Well, and we're going to do a big show on this next week. It's how to choose the proper financial advisor, okay? I tell clients there are a series of questions you need to ask your financial advisor. And I don't care if you've been working with them 1 year or her or 30 years. Okay, what you want to do is you want to interview them, because if your financial advisor is also not helping you with tax mitigation and tax planning, you should have a second financial advisor to go with it. And I tell them, do you love your advisor more than you love your family's wealth? Do you love your advisor more than the check you have to write out to the IRS each and every year? Where do you really draw the line? There's a happy compromise. You don't have to sever relationship with an existing advisor to get a second opinion, and to also tell your advisor, see, we work well with others. If an advisor is not comfortable working with another advisor who's a tax advisor, I think there's a little smoke going there, a little bit of a red flag.
Maybe you shouldn't be tolerant of that.
Well, another thing is I've had advisors, even some of the local advisors here, they're irritated with me because I ran a Morningstar report on their client's portfolio. And like I'll tell them, if you're afraid to lift up the covers, why don't you run the Morningstar report and fix this thing? Because if I know it's broke, you know it's broke, okay? And if I know how to fix it, you know how to fix it. Many times, Brad, it's pretty funny. We'll run a Morningstar report, and then our team of certified financial planners will do a portfolio observation and recommendation So we'll say, okay, based on your risk tolerance, this is what we see needs changing, and this is how we would go about changing it. Well, many advisors at that point will say, oh, no problem, no problem. I can go ahead and change that now. And I'll say to the client, why didn't they do it? Why did it take this to draw a light on that subject for them to make a change? That's one of the questions we want to look at and ask our current advisor. I say for folks that have significant wealth, if they do not have a team of financial advisors giving them alternate opinions, they're probably barking up the wrong tree. They may have serious issues within keeping that wealth to be able to move forward into legacy planning. It's my personal opinion.
How's your team working on your stuff right now? Do you have all of these questions answered, or are you learning things even from what Phil's saying right now and going, you know what? I'm going to go ask my guy why he isn't talking to me about this. 888-818-6557 to come in for a complimentary analysis on your portfolio and a tax analysis to go along with that, completely free, so that we can figure out what you need to do to strategize for the best retirement you can have. 888-818-6557. What are the various things and the variables that we need to discuss when we're talking about our risk tolerance? We'll discuss when we come back.
Hello, my name is Phil Capriotti. If you've already filed for Social Security and would like us to fast track you straight to a licensed fiduciary to create your tax-efficient retirement income plan, we'll be happy to accommodate you. You know, one of the most important priorities to ensure that you do not become tax poor in retirement is to, number one, structure a tax-efficient retirement income plan, as well as a comprehensive Morningstar report. This will ensure that you understand three major variables. Number one, how much risk are you taking? Number two, how much return are you receiving? And number three, how much are your internal and external fees? To fast track your meeting with one of our licensed and experienced team members, just click on the link below, complete the form attached, so we can provide you with an accurate and detailed plan. Let's start empowering your retirement right now.
So glad you're with us on Retire Smart. Austin Brett Johansson with Phil Capriotti, Empower Wealth and Tax, and we're talking about risk tolerance and whether or not you're getting full service from your advisor. There are some variables to consider, and the first of which is probably time horizon, because you've been accumulating for so long. Now we've got to figure out the distribution phase and what's your tolerance in your time horizon as you go forward. We don't have a whole lot of crystal balls that are working very well lately.
No, so portfolios should be designed, executed, and managed based on time horizon and risk tolerance. So, for instance, my 23-year-old's time horizon is about 40 years, okay? That's time horizon to retirement.
Yep.
Okay, before he has to concern himself with distribution planning. Now, all of my children have Ross, obviously, okay? I'm not the plumber that has broken pipes, okay? I'm the financial advisor. All of my 5 children and grandchildren, they already understand, pay the tax on the seed, not on the crop. So time horizon's very, very simple to look at. Many times I'll have clients that will say, well, yeah, we make some changes here and there, but nothing significant. They're sitting with the same mutual funds or similar mutual funds that either their dad and mom pass on to them, okay, or that they had 15, 20 years ago. Well, you have to get your portfolio ready for distribution planning. So what is your time horizon to start to receive or take distributions from your portfolio? And is it structured properly? Is it structured, as we say so many times, tax efficiently? So many times these financial advisors, and there's nothing wrong, we're all pretty good. You're either honest or you're not, okay? And if you're not honest, you don't last in this business. Pardon me, certainly not for decades and decades like most good advisors are. And if you're not managing your clients' taxes, I would recommend to all of you advisors out there, start taking some courses, okay? Start talking to your clients about mitigating taxes in retirement, because that's a big piece of what we're going to see in the future. Even with this new administration, but we still have this $36 trillion debt and growing. Taxes have to go up in order to pay this thing down. So we want to customize strategies based on your time horizon, based on your suitability, okay, to distribute these assets tax efficiently. So I would say to everyone out there, if their financial advisor, you have a wonderful relationship with this individual, whether it's a gentleman or a young lady, it's irrelevant. Are you having these conversations on a regular basis? The next thing I would say is, are you meeting with your advisor 4 to 5 times a year, minimum? So that's another thing. When we meet with our clients, we meet with them in the beginning of the year to do a mock tax return to see how much we can convert of their IRA to the Roth IRA. I want that Roth money earning returns for the entire year. And then at the end of the year, we're going to do another mock tax return to take a look and to do another Roth conversion before we jump into that next tax bracket. We also have 2 meetings where we're talking about portfolios, changes, and this type of thing. We send out a weekly newsletter explaining to clients different changes we've made in our portfolios based on changes in the market, changes in administration, changes in tax policy. This is tactical asset management. So we have an ongoing relationship. So I would say to you folks, if you're not meeting with your advisor to talk about taxes, Roth conversion, distribution planning, portfolio management, and not visiting with he or she 4, 5, 6 times a year, you probably need a second opinion.
Are you hoping that your plan's working? Hope is not a plan. Let's put together a plan that includes all of those things. 888-818-6557. I want to put up empowertaxbill.com real quick because I want to make sure you guys go to this. This is what Phil specializes in. He's put together a tax calculator to make it work for you. Make the phone call, 888-818-6557, or hit empowertaxbill.com. Scan the QR code. Phil, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Another true pleasure. I really appreciate it. This is kind of a nice change-up, too. I got to tell you...
we got to go.
Okay.
We'll be back. We'll see you in the office.
Awesome.